Today, let's make a glass rose. This was shown to me by Jerry Capel back in the 90s. We're going to start with, this is just a piece that's going to be my stem, and it's a sparkly green. I don't remember what the name was. It doesn't really matter. Pick your favorite color, but of course make them make sense. I like greens for the stems. I'm going to weld it to a handle so that I can put the whole thing in the kiln. As they come from the glass factory, they're very straight. They're in fact way too straight to be stems. So I'm going to throw it in the kiln and I'll pull it out and heat it up loosely with a big torch so that it's more or less straight, but not perfectly straight. We want it to look organically straight. So clean little weld there. We'll cut that off later, but we don't want it falling off, so I'm not just putting on a punty with an acute angle. It's really welded to it. Into the kiln with it. Now I've got a big paddle here that's it's a marble mold, but it also makes just a good place to put hot stuff for a few minutes while I'm making petals and need some place to set them down. And I don't want to stick them in the vermiculite. They'll get the fine powder stuck to them, and it's just really not necessary. These are very small, very thin. They're going to be used almost right away, and they will be reheated and kiln annealed. So make a little variety in the sizes. Start off with a fairly small petal, and that will become the center petal when we begin assembling the rose bud. I'll just set that down in the marble mold paddle. Yeah, I make up between 9 and 12 of them. And it's always better to have a few extra and decide that you don't need them rather than run out early. Just heat up a gather. Try and get it evenly into the leaf mashers so that it's not on one side or the other, but rather down the center. Quick squeeze, pull it out a little bit, and cut it off. And drop that in the paddle and repeat a bunch of times. Thankfully for the editor, we've gone into high speed, so we'll get the rest of these out of the ray very quick. As I remember, that's about how fast Jerry Capel worked, and with an exceedingly small torch, he was very efficient at it. Also, if you want a pair of these leaf mashers, which I make up out of some heavy-duty cast iron supply stuff, look at my website, connect through, and order a pair. These make great gifts. I've given a lot of these over the years to my mom, my sister, various lovely ladies. Now, that was just a little bit of leftover clear rod, but I don't like throwing down little tiny chunks, which I don't find later. They kind of get misplaced. And I know I'll use it if it's only got a little handle on it. So as long as it was already hot, I just went ahead and welded it up to a 4mm handle, and I'll throw it into the container there for use later. But if it's already hot, that's probably the time to do something with it rather than waiting for later and reheating and dealing with it then. Now, sometimes I make the rose petals out of cobalt and then heavy gold fume them. They look cool that way, but these are clear, and with the medium gold fume they really come out looking a nice red gold color. It really is pleasant. So this green section is going to be that little bulbous area just below the bud. So I'm going to find that little one, kind of lay these out in the size order. I'm going to apply them here just so I can see them. And then starting at roughly the smaller and going up to the larger, you'll begin building at the center of the green bud, and we'll just weld one on first down to the tip, and then gently heat the whole thing and fold it around itself like the center petal in a rose. There we go. The weld is completed, and we'll let the weld cool just a second, and then we'll heat up the petal itself, taking the end of the tweezers, just gently fold it around, and then repeat on the other side. And I'm going to heat the whole thing up and then stretch it out a little bit so it's a little bit longer and thinner. That'll be my final size on it. Grab your next petal in the order, heat up the bottom of it. Rarely do these thermal shock. They're just so small and thin, and you get to them fairly quickly that I haven't needed a lot of preheating when putting them back into the flame. Just a quick flash and heat up the tip and get both sides adequately hot that when you put them together it doesn't bend and doesn't deform, but you have a good weld area. Don't lightly tack them on with acute angles and very hot glass to cold glass. These will fracture. So make clean little welds. The next one I'm just folding around the first one so that they're kind of face to face, but the second one overlaps as it's getting larger. And we'll just keep welding those on and working our way out. Stretching it just a little bit so it matches in size the center. And then gently folding it around. And you can heat up the center one enough for it to tack weld to it at the edges, and then cool it, and then apply a little bit of direct heat right to that to make sure that the welds won't crack later. Again, it's just really important to get them roughly the same heat when you stick them together. So we'll be making the whole bud on here, and then I'll be grabbing it with the claws to transfer it to the long stalk portion. I don't like making it on the stalk portion because the stalk being fairly thin, if I applied it already and was doing all of this heating, I'd probably see it wiggling and deforming a little bit as I'm building the bud, and I don't want it to do that. Yeah, that's most of this project, just adding petals and pressing them down on the edges, heating those edges, trying to make sure that it's a smooth weld really quickly, and move on. And use your back flame to keep the whole thing hot enough that it doesn't just crack. Like, you know, if you take this out of the heat and just hold it too long, it's going to crack at this point. It needs to be completed, it needs to be fumed, and it needs to be annealed. All of that applies heat into it that helps distribute that stress that you're building when welding it together rather quickly. Now there's a little dot of gold on there, just a small grain of it. It doesn't take much. and I try to have two because you want a backup. Should you drop it, or if gold is a very heavy material. Often enough when you heat it, it will want to run. It's not like silver that'll stay in place. It will drip down and drop off, and you'll have a great little gold coated portion of your work area that's of no use to you. So down inside the petals, trying to get the flame down in there. And the fuming is so much easier to do with a very precise little pinpoint flame like that. It's very quick if you can put all the heat right onto the gold itself. And it very quickly picks up that lovely cranberry. Drop that back in there, and the reason I don't stick those back in the kiln is often enough as that cools, that little gold grain will drop off. So by putting it into that little vial, if it drops off, it's in the bottom of the vial and I can see it and I can use it. If it drops off in the kiln, it'll just blend in with kiln dust and whatever else is in there. It's really small. So I don't remember what these are called. What are those things called underneath? No one else knows either. I'm going to put 5 of them because that's a good organic number. Little 5 green stamen-y things down there. Yeah, I know they're not stamens. I'll look it up later. Clean up that little rod so it's nice and straight. Don't leave any pointy little pokey things on there that you can hurt yourself with later. So I'm going to go with that. Put that back in the kiln. Let it get an even heat on it while I pull this out. And it's just way too straight to exist in nature like that. So we'll put a big flame on and gently heat areas of it and let it go a little out of round, and then roughly marver it back to nearly true, but with some angles to it. You just want it to look organic. So no longer perfectly straight, but it looks good. Yeah, if you have trouble with this, go ahead and put a punty on the other end and use that to get a little bit more control. Doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, that's the whole point of doing that. There we go. Let's put some thorns on. This is some unknown color over white. And it's kind of a sparkly translucent, but anything that would make like a good looking thorn. I'm also a big fan of putting North Star jade over cobalt, and using that as a dark green. Translucent greens look really good over the white. Oh, in this case, the color over the white is called green money from North Star. And just add on some thorns. Just make a good clean weld up, but don't heat so much that your stock bends. Do it quickly. Heat one side of it. You have the other, the thorn part ready to go. Touch it to it, and then just pull it backwards a little bit so it forms that thorn shape instead of straight out. And they will have a little tiny ball on them or be rounded a little bit, so they won't actually be pokey, thorny, which is good if you're giving these as gifts. So there's the thorns. We'll put some leaves on there. I've got some transparent green sitting here. Use a little bit of that. Same mashers as for the petals. And we'll just need 2 of these. And again, try and get them centered in your masher so that there's as much leaf on one side as there is on the other. We're going to put a handle up to the other side and then cut off the leaf so it's ready to go on the end of the little clear punny. And this gives us the opportunity to kind of pull and bend to make it look more like a leaf. And now we'll cut it off from the supply side. And that doesn't even need to go in the kiln. It's so thin and we'll be using it so quickly that we can just set it aside for a moment. We'll do one more and we'll stick those on the stock. And of course, if you hold the rod upwards in your right hand, it will build and gather and form a ball, and if you hang it down and heat it, it'll form a longer, thinner portion. So depending how you want to shape your leaf, long and skinny or short and fat and round, you adjust your angle in the flame there. Okay, throw a punty on that and then pull and curve it a little bit, resting it on the edge of something. You can use your torch nozzle or whatever just to give it a little back pressure in the middle of the leaf so that it curves. Now grab our thorny stem there and weld up our leaves very quick. And again, heat it significantly through to where you've got a molten half on your stem, but time it so that the leaf is ready to apply, and when you put them together and pull them apart, your stem does not just fall apart and bend over on you. If you've done that, you've gotten too much heat into the stem. And again, heat just one half of the stem very quickly. Of course it'll spread, but you're timing it so that it doesn't spread and lose control. There we go. Final shape of the leaf, and then cut off the punny. Well, in this case, break it off and polish it. And there we go. That's ready to apply to the bud. Take that out and warm up our claws a little bit so we don't chill the petals. And then gently, this doesn't require a lot of force, it's not a real heavy item and you don't want to crack the petals just through sheer force. And we'll cut it off just below the green part there. And it's good to clean up those little rod ends before you set them down and put them away. Boom, it's cleaned up, it's ready to use next time. And you definitely don't want to pull those long skinny hairs of glass that get all over your shop and poke out eyeballs. So real simple weld, it's just a stem, goes right into the base of the bud. So I'm going to release the claws so that I can just set the whole thing back into the kiln now. Well, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed.